Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review, and today is going to be somewhat of a double feature as we take a look at the DC Multiverse Batman vs. Hush 2-pack from McFarlane Toys. Okay, so I purchased this recently. Today is July 27th, 2022 at my local Target. If my memory serves me right, I believe I paid, $39 for this. It's a great looking 2-pack. As you can see, it features the fan favorite villain Hush against Batman. And this is inspired by the comic book run series by writer Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee in the issues of Batman way back when, I think in the early 2000s. I want to say maybe like 2002 or 2003. Let's get started. So first off, I believe this version of Batman, the Jim Lee inspired Hush Batman, is not available as a solo figure yet. I think this is the only way you can obtain the figures through the 2-pack. Much like the Hal Jordan Green Lantern in the Green Lantern 2-pack, it's an exclusive only to that set. I have a feeling that in the future we'll probably get a repaint, and I'm thinking the repaint, if we do get one, is going to be more accurate to the comic book, because this color scheme is actually not accurate to the comic book. On our left here we have the Hush figure. So right now you can purchase Hush either in the 2-pack or you could buy it as a solo figure. Now the difference is, I believe, is that the solo figure has purple gloves, whereas this one's a little bit more accurate and has the brown leather gloves. As you can see, behind the figures, there's 2 individual display stands plus a display base, and then each figure is accompanied with its own trading card. In addition to the figures, we get a couple of accessories. We have 2 batarangs in the upper right, and we have a shovel on the lower right. On the back of the box, a nice image of Batman and Hush. One thing I noticed that the promotional images and the images on the package show is that Hush actually comes here with a much more accurately colored trench coat. Here it's kind of like a brown leather versus this kind of weird, it's almost like an olive green coat. At least that's what it looks like under my lighting. But I would have preferred it much more if it was accurate and looked like this, the leather brown. But that's not the case. Alright, so let's get started and take these figures out. So as I mentioned, this was based off of the Hush storyline from the early 2000s. It's for many people, they kind of consider it one of the definitive Batman stories, much like The Dark Knight Returns. It's also, like, if you're a big fan of artist Jim Lee, many consider it to be like, some of his finest work. I'm a big fan of the story and the comic. They collected this series multiple times in trade paperback form. So if you don't have a graphic novel, go out and get one. It's a wonderful story. The artwork's amazing, and this is the story where they debuted the Hush character, also known as Dr. Thomas Elliott. All right, let's take this out. Alright, so first impressions of the figures while it's still in the tray. They look amazing, but I do have some reservations about them. The quality of Hush here, it looks awesome. A lot of nice texturing on the coat, a lot of detailing. Now, for me, the Batman looks great. It looks to be, pretty close to the comic book. We'll see in a little bit. But with McFarlane Toys, I'm so used to seeing action figures that are like hyper detailed with like micro textures on the uniform and a lot of embellishments on the body armor. This one is very true to the design in the sense it's Batman wearing spandex. You're not going to find any like fancy micro texturing on his bodysuit. You're not going to find embellishments on his gauntlets or boots. This is really a, spandex clad wearing superhero. We have the batarang here, and then we also have the shovel. Underneath, now this is nice, but I kind of feel conflicted about this also. It's cool that they give you a city backdrop for the cardboard insert, but at the same time, this is not something you can use later because you have to remove the plastic overlay, which is eventually going to damage the cardboard backing. So it would have been nice if they found a way to package the cards and stands without affixing it permanently to the cardboard insert, because the insert itself would make a great diorama, especially if you have a nice detail for a shelf and you want something to like, something to accent the background. This is a really cool looking image. But like I said, once you remove this, it's going to, damage the packaging. So, which is why, I'm a kind of like a mint in box collector. So for now, I'm not going to remove the stands and the display base. But we could look at the display base up close while we're at it. So you're going to get a display base here, much like the other McFarlane 2-packs. As you can see, it's kind of like a cemetery. It's kind of like a brick road. And then you also have the Jason Todd Tombstone right here. And as you can see, it just plugs into the base. The base, to the best of my knowledge, I think it only has two feet pegs. So you could peg a character on the left side right here, and then you can stand another figure opposite on the right side over here. It comes with the usual McFarlane circular bases, and like I mentioned earlier, we have the 2 trading cards. So in addition to the batarangs and the shovel, you're getting a lot of accessories. So I think, this is a fair deal. If you're paying $39 for this box set, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck because you are getting additional accessories. Whereas most of the time when you buy, a single McFarlane figure, you don't always get an accessory unless the character warrants it. Okay, so let's get started. Let's take a look at Batman and Hush. Alright, so we have both figures here. We have the Jim Lee inspired Batman. Now, I love this costume a lot because it's very, quintessential, iconic Batman. There's nothing really fancy about him. It's really just Batman in his spandex with his underwear over his tights. It's that kind of classic look. It has the somewhat, iconic version of his bat emblem minus the oval. This covers the width of his chest. And over here we have Hush. It looks like a great action figure. Now, Hush is a figure that, we've gotten multiple times throughout the last, I want to say the figure's first, the character's first figure, I think, came out in, I want to say 2004. Under the DC Direct label. And DC Direct offered 2 versions of the Hush action figure back in 2004. There was the standard mummy wrapped head, and then there was a Toy Fair exclusive Hush figure which looked like the Jason Todd character. I believe Mattel gave us a Hush figure also, but I think it might have been based off of the, was it Arkham Asylum, Arkham City game, and then again DC Direct, or DC, might have been DC Essentials at the time. At that point, they gave us a Hush action figure also based on the video game. Designs was designed by the video game studio Rocksteady, and those versions are a little bit more like the video game iteration of the character, not like the comic book one. You know, this one's much more in line with the comic book one since it's based off of Jim Lee's design. So yeah, we have Batman and Hush. So to begin, let's start off with Batman. It's a figure that's, you know, really, it's a character that's really dominating the McFarlane line. Like I said before, you know, let's be honest, the whole DC Multiverse line it seems like it's built around Batman, you know, being as kind of like the flagship character of the line, which is understandable. It's a character that's very popular with children and adults. So we have the Jim Lee inspired Batman from the comic book Hush, or the series, or the mini series. It's the Batman comic book, but it was based off of the Hush storyline. I'm kind of like tongue-tied this morning. Excellent looking figure, as you can see here. The sculpting is really well done. You know, again, if you're used to like the hyper detailing of like the standard McFarlane figures, this one, it's going to be somewhat disappointing because you're not going to get all the crazy detailing and bells and whistles of a standard McFarlane Batman figure. But if you're a comic book fan, this is kind of a godsend because this is really, you know, kind of tried and true to like the original design. It looks great. The head sculpt looks awesome. Nicely sculpted. You have some nice wrinkles on the forehead of his cowl. Let's get that into focus. He has a nice broad chin like Batman should have. As you notice, the bat emblem itself is actually a relief. It's sculpted over the chest, so you can actually feel it, which I think is nice. You know, it's a lot better than just like painting or screening it on directly onto the chest. It's nice when you actually have like a physical detail like that. The abdomen here, you can see they have subtle folds. You know, so it gives you an idea that this is actually a bodysuit, and it's not like this like a bare figure that's just painted. Nice, very simple utility belt, nothing crazy. Nice large pouches. It seems to be absent of a buckle, you know, but that's all right. I think it's just kind of like based off the original design. There's his underwear over his tights. It's a little bit gappy up here, as you can see. It doesn't hug as tightly as I think it should, but that's all right. Very bare legs. I'd appreciate it if they gave us some folds and wrinkles like on the abdomen, like on the leg area. The knees are okay. I think they could have done a better job of, you know, blending the knees in with the upper legs. You know, it seems like the break here seems a little bit too obvious, but that's all right. I mean, it's kind of in line with like other figures of this style. One thing I noticed also is that his right leg here, it doesn't see, unless it's just my figure. Yeah, it's just my figure. I have to fix that. So if you look on the back, you know, the plastic is warped. So I'll have to fix that by heating this up in boiling water and then reshaping it and making sure it fits into the peg correctly. So it's unfortunate that mine's kind of, it's not defective because it could easily be fixed, but it'd be nice if I actually got one that wasn't, you know, messed up. Like it should look as clean as this. This one here is a little sloppy. But again, you know, it's something that could easily be fixed. I'm not too worried. Standard Batman boots, you know, nothing fancy here. Now, one thing that bothered me about this figure, so after I picked up this figure at the store, I was walking to the register to check out, and this is the one big thing that bothers me about this figure is that the joint that attaches the forearm to the bicep is black. and it cuts into the bicep muscle here. Now, I can understand why it is what it is. You know, they're not going to paint it in half. But I do think that one way they could have corrected it, it might have been more expensive, is to dual mold the joint. And I think dual molding involves like two different colors of plastics, and then just kind of, you know, molding them together. Dual molding, I think, is something that you might find in certain like Lego minifigure pieces. I know they use dual molding there. Or a much simpler solution to this, because I don't like the look of the black joint cutting into the bicep like that, because it also extends over and then his elbow is black. I would have preferred it if they made the joint gray, because then the elbow would be gray, and then at the very least you'd have a little bit of gray cutting into the forearm, which I don't think is as bad as having this much black cutting into the bicep and covering the elbow completely. But for me, that's a little bit more subjective. You know, for other people that they might not mind, but it just kind of bothers me because it breaks the muscle up and it just doesn't look right. Or they could have just given us a single jointed elbow, and I think they could have corrected that altogether. But at the same time, with a single jointed elbow, you're not going to have the full range of movement. The cape is well sculpted. I say this all the time with capes. I prefer it if a cape is actually neutral and not like dynamically flowing like this one is. It looks good, but at the same time, you know, it's going to take up shelf space. You know, it's going to limit the amount of figures that you place on the side. Unless you're a collector that likes having your shelf space kind of like sparsely decorated. Like if you're one of those collectors that likes to give a lot of breathing room between characters, then you're not going to have an issue. If you're one of those collectors that likes to like stockpile your shelves and try to fit as many figures as possible on one shelf, this could be an issue right here. But it looks fantastic, you know, even though it's dynamically flowing, you know, it breathes a lot of life into the character. All right, so let's take a look at the figure from a front view. Nicely sculpted, nice proportions. It's very heroic in stature. Let's take a look at a profile. Yeah, in terms of the proportions, I think they got everything right. It's a very solid Batman. There's nothing to really complain about it in terms of the physique or the presentation of the character. Really well done. In terms of Batman's articulation, his head rotates. Let's get this into focus first. Head rotates. As you can see, the neck rotates and the head rotates. They're both independent. No, I take it back. They're not independent of one another. This is surprising. All right, so this could be a mark against the figure. As you can see, the head and the neck are actually one solid piece. So when he looks up, you know, he doesn't look up, but his head and neck will move in tandem because they're not separate. It works for like if the figure looks down, but when you look up, it's not going to do much. And then when you rotate his head, the neck rotates along with it. I kind of find that a little disappointing, especially with McFarlane. Their action figure engineering is always like top notch. This is something that, you know, even like most Marvel Legends figures, I believe, I think have a separate head and neck piece. I'm trying to think about that. Or maybe they don't. I think what I'm thinking of is Marvel Legend figures, the neck is permanently affixed to the upper torso and the head's on a ball joint. This just seems really odd that the neck and the head are actually one piece. That's really throwing me off. It's not going to hinder his movement because he could still look left and right. But at the same time, I'm wondering if, you know, we're being shortchanged just a little. It might not bother some people, but, you know, I just wanted to let you know that. The arms rotate. They go out. You have a bicep cut. So you have the standard bicep swivel. As I pointed out earlier, you have double jointed elbows and the pins are exposed. Let's see how smooth the movement is. Oh man, it doesn't want to move. Yeah, it's kind of like a tight moving joint. Articulated wrists. Did somewhat better job of covering that ball joint. You know, McFarlane figures, a lot of them have this horrible look where the ball joint on the wrist is really exposed. This one covers it up a little bit, but it's still kind of bothersome. You get a nice cleaner cut across the mid-torso for the ab crunch. I like this a lot better than some of the previous McFarlane Batman figures. Sometimes the ab crunch, it's cut really weird. This one's a lot cleaner in its cut. But it doesn't want to crunch forward. Will it move back? It moves back, not all that much, and it doesn't want to move forward. But it does tilt a little from side to side. I believe waist articulation, I think. Let me see. Yeah, it swivels at the waist a little. It's kind of tight. Yeah, so right now the articulation for the torso is kind of disappointing. You know, there's the issue for me with the neck. And then the ab crunch doesn't really want to crunch forward, and it doesn't really want to arch back, so I don't know what the point of it is. You know, it's a little bit more static than I prefer. The legs kick out about that much. They kick out. Does he do full splits? Almost. Again, very universal joint system in the legs that we see with most McFarlane figures. Double jointed knees, exposed pins. There's no... Is there a thigh swivel? There's a slight thigh swivel. You get about that much movement. No boot cut, ankle articulation, and toe articulation. Alright, so there's Batman. So now let's jump to Hush. This is going to be a long review. So we're already hitting like the 20-minute mark. Okay, so now we have Dr. Thomas Elliott, also known as Hush, very popular Batman villain that was introduced in the early 2000s. This one features Hush with his mummified mask, and he's kind of screaming. He has the jade pendant that was given to him from his mother when he was a child. It's around his neck. He's wearing a trench coat, and what's weird about this trench coat, like I pointed out earlier, is that the trench coat is actually like a weird, like olive green, not like a leather brown on the package. It bothers me because the solo release of the figure, I believe, has the same shade for the trench coat, but purple gloves. So neither of these figures are accurate. Sometimes I think some fans give McFarlane a little bit too much credit in terms of accuracy because they don't always hit the nail on the head when it comes to the color schemes. Sometimes it feels like it's intentional because they want you to double dip and, you know, buy like the gold label figure later. You know, for example, like the Dark Knight Returns, Armored Batman, none of those color schemes are accurate to the comic book. And for me, it's a little bit disappointing that this isn't like the leather brown that his trench coat should have. Mafex makes a Hush action figure, and I'll probably be reviewing that in the near future, and that one's like dead on accurate in terms of the color scheme and all the features. This one's good, but I still have some issues with it. But it's a fantastic looking figure. As you can see, the head sculpt is amazing. The trench coat, beautiful. The undershirt, really well done. I really wish that with Hush, they provided the version of the character where he has the trench coat open, you know, exposing his belts and holsters. But I kind of feel like that might have been a cost-cutting, not a feature, a cost-cutting method, just because they wanted to keep the price of the figure reasonable. Because, you know, if this guy comes outfitted with a fancy trench coat and then you have to give him a holster, if you have to give him the upper bodysuit that extends past the waist, it seems like this would have been a much more expensive figure. So I kind of feel like the closed trench coat hides all of the accessories that should have came with the figure. So they could keep this guy kind of priced in that like $19 range. But with that being said, you know, they didn't sacrifice in terms of the detailing and the texturing and the quality of the figure overall, because it is a very premium looking action figure just by looking at it. The figure could benefit from more paint application. If you're like a customizer, you know, give this coat a nice like wash and highlighting, and it'll really like bring this thing to life even more. So very nice. Here's a front view. Really well done. Again, much like Capes, I prefer it if his trench coat was kind of more in a neutral position as opposed to like flowing dynamically. But if you're into fig photography or you like your figures looking a little bit more dynamically posed, this is really up your alley. Here's the back, profile. Really well done figure. In terms of articulation, Hush, his head rotates, and this is where it's different from Batman. As you can see here, this one has the head separate from the neck, where Batman does not have that. I prefer this much more because it allows for the head to like have greater range of motion. As you can see here, he can like tilt his head to the left or right. He allows him to look down pretty far, allows him to look up pretty high. So the range of motion for this guy's head is excellent. In terms of his arms, they rotate, they go out. This one, his right arm doesn't want to go out as high as the left, and this one feels a little bit loose too, so I don't know what's going on there. Bicep cut, bicep swivel, dual pinned elbows, and they're exposed pins. His hands are articulated. He comes with, now this is unfortunate also, but if you've read the comic books, Hush often dual wields his pistols, and he only has one trigger finger, and the other one's a fist. Ideally, you'd want Hush to have two trigger finger hands, just so he could dual wield pistols. But much like most modern McFarlane figures, they don't come with, firearms. The easy solution to that would buy that upcoming Spawn accessory pack. That's just all firearms, and just give him two pistols. But you can't necessarily do that because he has a fist. So I think that's a major flaw against this figure. If you wanted to pose him like iconically, and like he often does in the comic books, you definitely do need the other hand with the trigger finger. So that's kind of like a mark against the figure. If he has an ab crunch, I'm unaware of where it is because the coat overlays this. I'm really curious to see what would be under here, because I'm wondering if you remove the coat, if his upper torso is actually fully developed. Part of me is wondering if, the shirt only goes as far as the chest. I don't know if he has an abdomen or not. Let's see if we can kind of take a peek underneath, see what's going on. Oh, is my camera catching that? Yeah, so unfortunately, he doesn't have anything going on underneath the body. So if you had like visions of buying this figure and cutting open up the coat, just exposes his full bodysuit, you're going to be disappointed because there is no full bodysuit. Once you fold this back, you only get his pants, and then beneath his chest, where his abdomen should be, there's nothing there. It's just a very large, tube. He does not have a developed, like, any musculature or body underneath the coat. So just to warn you in advance, if you had visions of cutting open the coat or coat swapping with like the Constantine figure, you're not going to reveal anything underneath it. In terms of leg movement, it's going to be hindered by the coat. He kicks up about there, kicks out about there, but the coat, as you can see, is holding it back. He has dual pinned knees, ankle articulation. The ball joint's nicely hidden here. I can appreciate that. And toe articulation. Very solid figure. So it's a nice set. The both versions kind of complement each other really, really well. So some slight disappointments on both ends, but I think they're both very solid efforts. Let's get these guys into focus. Let's do the Mortal Kombat verse stage pose where they're like gonna like fight each other. Or if you watch UFC, you know, or boxing, there's always the stare down photo, and then they're kind of like list their stats. Let's do that here, just for the hell of it. So there you go. It's kind of like Mortal Kombat. Let's get this into focus. Right there, that guy's in focus. Come on, get in focus. Did you not want to focus? Why is that? Okay. Slowly pull them apart. Alright, that's good enough. Okay, so since we're on the subject of comic books, Batman and Hush, it's only fair that we compare them to their actual 2D representations on the comic book page, just to see how accurate they are. First off, we'll start with Batman. So one thing I mentioned is that Batman, he's not colored accurately. If you've read the actual comic book, he's not wearing black and gray. His costume's actually blue and gray in the comic. Again, if you don't have the trade paperback or the collected edition of the Hush storyline, I highly suggest you check it out. Even if you're not a comic book reader, I think it's just nice to have. You know, I think there's certain comic book stories that, even if you're not a comic book reader or collector, it's just nice to have. And, you know, just read. You know, like Watchmen's one of those kind of books. The Dark Knight Returns. Hush, you know, if you're a big fan of Batman. You know, it's kind of like, those are kind of like the definitive stories of those characters. So as you can see, his costume is blue and gray. It's not black and gray. So I have a feeling if they do a solo release of the figure, it'll probably be under the gold label line. And it'll probably be accurately colored. And it'd be nice if they do a solo release of the figure if they give us the grapple gun. You know, Batman kind of has that grapple gun that looks like a canister that shoots out the grapple hook. Here's Hush Joker. It'd be nice if we got a version of that. But like I mentioned, you know, Batman is not wearing black and gray. It's very blue and gray. But overall, it's a very solid version of the figure. You know, I know a lot of people were excited about Rebirth Batman because that's a very iconic Batman. I kind of think this one, even more so, is more iconic than the Rebirth version because you actually get the black underwear over the tights. So if you've been waiting for the longest time to get a Batman figure that looks, you know, much more like the comic book, and if you weren't happy with like maybe the Detective 1000 version of Batman that first came out like 3 years ago from McFarlane, this is a better figure. It's better developed, better sculpted. Some of those earlier versions of Batman, like I think the Detective 1000 one, the head was really small. It was almost like peanut sized. But overall, solid figure. I'd give it a rating anywhere between a 7.5 to a low 8. And the reason is mostly because the inaccuracies in the color scheme, and also because of some of the articulation. I felt that the articulation could have been better handled in the head. You know, it kind of bothers me that the head and neck are one piece. But again, that's just me. You know, it might not bother you at all. But like I said, excellent figure nonetheless. And now let's jump to Dr. Thomas Elliott, aka Hush. And I bookmarked the pages. I didn't have any paper on hand to bookmark it, so I just used my Warhammer stands. So, I don't know. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So, I'm kind of conflicted on the Hush, on what they're giving us, because it comes with the cemetery display stand and the shovel. But during that sequence in the comic book, when Batman first encounters Hush in the graveyard, Hush actually, it's right here. His coat is actually open. And then this is where he unmasks and he reveals himself to be Jason Todd. I don't want to spoil it, but I'm not going to go into all the details. But he removes the mask and then you see it's Jason Todd. This is the figure I've been waiting for. This is the figure I really want. Wizard Toy Fair magazine had an exclusive DC Direct version of this version of Hush. And it's kind of pricey on the secondary market right now. You're looking at anywhere between $50 to $100, depending on the seller. It's an older figure. It's not going to scale with the McFarlane stuff because it's only 6 inches, and articulation's like half of like a modern action figure. But the sculpt is well done. It looks like a Jim Lee design. But this is the version of Hush that I wished McFarlane gave us. You know, I like the idea of the trench coat being open. I like seeing the utility belt. I like seeing the upper uniform, how it kind of exceeds past the waist right here. But Hush does have the knee pads and the boots, like this costume design. But again, this is where the 2-pack is kind of inaccurate because here's the Tombstone. Again, the Tombstone doesn't match the one that we got in the 2-pack. The one in the 2-pack is a very basic Tombstone, whereas the Tombstone that was portrayed in the comic book is actually like a very decorative one with an angel statue atop it. You know, there's no way you were going to get this in the 2-pack. That would raise the price of the 2-pack by like $10. So if we turn a little bit further down into the comic book, you'll see the version of Hush that the figure is based off of. More accurately, it's this guy right here. So this is essentially the McFarlane figure. You're getting the closed trench coat. And here's what I was talking about. Here he is dual wielding 2 pistols. You know, this guy doesn't come with any pistols, but it's unfortunate that you're not going to have the option of dual wielding because he has the fist on the one hand. But nonetheless, it's a great looking figure. It's very accurate in its design outside of the color choice of the coat. For Hush, I'd rate him a solid 8 to 8.5. I think it's a really well done figure. It's not the Hush I wanted. I really wanted the Jason Todd version of the character, and I'm sure we will get it. I have a feeling, you know, they're going to give that figure, you know, the dual treatment. You know, they'll probably release to us the Jason Todd figure solo, and then I have a feeling they'll release a gold label version, you know, down the road that might be even more accurate than the solo release. You know, this is a really well done mold. There's some excellent pieces going on here, like the legs, the boots, and I'm sure it's something that McFarlane, like all the tooling that's involved in sculpting an action figure, you know, that could run for like lots and lots of money, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to want that to go to waste. So if I was a betting man, you know, expect a Jason Todd version of Hush in the future. You know, if not this year, maybe early next year, if I had to guess. Alright, so let's wrap this video up. This is one of my longer reviews. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning subscriber viewer, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. Alright, later.